There's another week, or another edition of the On the Mic podcast, and a busy week here is how I meant to say it. You'd think I'd have the intro down because as of today, this is the 200th episode. So I don't even know how I made it to 200, and I don't think I've had 200 views combined on all 200. But anyways, if I'm gonna get 200, I'm gonna have a guest of somebody who I have the utmost respect for, somebody who's one of the very best in this business covering MMA, the senior editor at Action Network, one and only Dan Stupp. How are you, sir?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So, yeah, I mean, nothing really going on in the sport these days. Between Bellator and the UFC, and I'm sure you're going to have like 100 examples, but have you ever seen catastrophic failures on back-to-back nights in which we have so much to discuss outside of just talking about how good the events were?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there have been other examples of some really botched scores like that, or just, kind of leaving people scratching their head. But this is definitely one of the more high profile ones I can think of, largely just because it seems to actually be sparking some change or some discussions and stuff, which I think we're so used to just kind of turning a blind eye or ignoring a bad scorecard and moving on to the next one. I'm surprised this one's actually kind of got people stopping to reconsider the whole thing.
I know Mike Mazzulli came out and said something, they're doing the whole investigation. Now, we may not find everything out, the public, I should say, but what, you from being a veteran in the sport and in this business, what is the right thing? Because it's easy to say, it's like when a kid goes outside and then they get in trouble. It's like, all right, you're not going outside. I don't want Douglas Crosby grounded from covering fights, because there's going to be another one in 10 years from now. There will be another Doug Crosby 10 years from now. So what are the actual changes you would like to see to avoid incompetent judging, to avoid, I'm going to talk about the co-main event, but I think what people realize, it's not, oh, how could you score it this way or score it that way? When certain fights are scored in certain ways, you're pulling money off of a fighter's plate. And Paddy Pimblett has a different purse than Jared Gordon. I guarantee you Jared would love to have Paddy's purse and money and everything that comes with it. So when you're doing that, you're affecting livelihood. So what is the real answer? What would you like to see?
I mean, I think you need some pretty big sweeping changes. I mean, I think the most obvious one is we really, I think, need kind of a centralized regulatory body, where we're not kind of doing it. I mean, we enforce rules differently from state to state. I mean, it's just kind of insane that we're a real sport, and it just, you don't see it like that kind of in other sports. The Yankees don't go play in a different state other than maybe the DH or something like that. But I don't know. I think more than anything, there's got to be like a system in place that we, like when we call up the commission, or you call up the commission. I don't do much reporting these days. So when you call up the commission, be like, this judge clearly messed something up. Like, what's the process for this? And right now there is no process other than we don't answer that. And maybe the judge, goes on social media and tries to answer himself. Maybe not. It's just, there's so little lack of not only transparency, but accountability. And until you get both of those, and I don't think you're going to get that when state commissions are doing things differently from state to state. You kind of need that centralized body, which, again, I don't see that happening anytime soon. And that's a very big wish. But until we get some consistency from state to state, and some accountability for judges and referees and stuff, this stuff's just going to keep happening over and over again.
Well, it must be embarrassing for myself to admit to such a veteran in this game, but I've never called a commission, but mainly because I was around in Chicago when Yoel Romero fought Robert Whitaker, and he was supposed to have his allotted time. This is another thing going back to state by state. Okay, he's supposed to get, I think, 2 hours to cut off extra weight. No, we pulled him. You pulled him 25 minutes in. I know somebody on the commission, and I was like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Why was he was healthy. He looks healthy. Why was he pulled? Mike, he was pulled. That's all I'm going to say to you. All right, man. I thought, and then he's like, it was heat of moment. It's like, I'm just asking. I'm not even asking to report it. I would like to know to report it, but I'm just asking you as somebody who knows you. So that kind of soured me with the commission. Illinois commission, by the way, is one of the worst I've been around, but that's neither here or there. I think the other side of this, and we could talk about, punishments and changes and all of that, but I think for me, and I have not been in this sport as long as you have, but for me, finally, right? Because there's always three people who get judged the most after every single fight: fighter one, fighter two, and the referee. And we can make jokes about Steve Mazzagatti and Mario Yama. Like, there's so many referee jokes we have. We never, I think, and no matter how you feel about them, I think the only joke I've had towards judges that's in the public eye is Rogan calling Adelaide Bird a nice lady. Like,
Yeah.
we get nothing. And I'm not saying I need jokes on judges, but when you joke, you bring light to a situation. And I think finally, for better or for worse, it's about damn time these judges are getting called into question.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the role the media plays. I was just talking to someone about this recently. The early days of MMA Junkie, in the early days of covering MMA, you were kind of an ambassador for a sport or an ally. Like, part of your job, I think, at that time, because it was such a new thing, was you were really kind of promoting the sport yourself or trying to sell people on the sport. And obviously that's selfish reasons. As a journalist, you want a sport to be around long enough. And I mean, really, when I first started it, kind of the boogeyman was a serious death or injury. And I'm honestly surprised kind of in the UFC, we haven't had, a very bad one. And I still think it's just kind of a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. But back then it was just, we thought a serious injury or death would kind of be the end of the sport. But I think we've kind of gone beyond that now. And I think, within a few years of the sport taking off and getting on Spike TV and stuff, we realized that, we've grown out of that initial phase of becoming a sport. And now you can't ignore the very clear problems that are happening with the sport, whether it's fighter pay or concussions or how state commissions work and stuff. But honestly, it's insane that 15 years later, getting into MMA, one of the biggest issues back then was judging, and it's still the same exact issue. I think we've made some progress, and they've tried to, give resources to judges to learn and discuss things, but it's clearly not working.
And I don't have to tell you, sir. I mean, for so long, the conversation was, well, I like MMA because it's not boxing and everything's fixed in boxing and boxing is so corrupt. Listen, call me crazy, and I'm not here to say one way or another, but maybe I'm saying it without saying it. Sean O'Malley, your cash cow against Peter Yan. Paddy Pimblett against Jared Gordon. Paddy Pimblett, your cash cow. I'm not here to say one thing or another. It's a little ironic, almost poetic, if you like, terrible things happening all at once, that we have the James Krause situation, and we have, in a span of 3-4 months, whatever it was, the Sean O'Malley fight and the Jared Gordon fight. I really don't get it. I want to start, though, because I know you have a very big role. I mean, when it's on your Twitter bio, it's real, right? So in the MMA betting landscape, I want to talk about, this past weekend's UFC event, and then, obviously Rafion Stotts defeating Danny Sabatello in Bellator 289. But is this the darkest cloud that the UFC has had to endure in recent memory? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, again, I told you off air, it's such an honor to have you on here. I know I've known you for a while, but for me, I'm getting up there finally in my years covering the sport, but it was always fighter inflicted. It was John Jones, it was Connor, it was these fighters. It's not, and yet this James Krause situation is coach inflicted, but everyone was doing it in some shape or form. What are your thoughts on this entire situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's we can call it bad luck or kind of the worst time for the UFC, but we all knew this was just kind of sitting there waiting to pop its head up. I think anyone who kind of saw what James Krause has been doing the past few months, and again, we don't know exactly what happened here, but I think we all knew he was walking a very fine line where something like this could happen. Kind of, my role or my role in MMA is kind of moved from, I'm still editing, but kind of geared more toward a sports betting angle. So this is kind of right in my wheelhouse. And, I've did kind of this certificate program through Ohio University where it was called sports gambling education, but it was mainly for kind of administrators and people from colleges and universities to teach their students kind of how information flow works and, how sports betting can be affected by, information you give out or you don't give out. So I don't know, just kind of going through this whole program and learning more about sports betting and seeing how other sports handle it. Again, you realize the UFC was kind of sitting on a ticking time bomb. They've kind of tried to create I don't know, rules and regulations for it, and they're doing a lot of it kind of retroactively, which is unfortunate. But no, I mean, and this is going to continue to be a problem. I think, we're hearing the rumors. I'm sure you've heard them too, that they've really just scratched the surface with James Krause and this whole situation. I think there's going to be a lot more people in MMA involved. And I don't even think it's people necessarily doing something wrong. I think you're just going to realize there's a lot of people betting on fights who are involved in the industry in some aspect.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate again, especially because it's poetic. If you like chaos, you've got terrible judging, you've got the James Krause situation, and really to kind of come full circle, you have no clarity on a lot of big things going into 2023. I know, there, like you said, there's gonna be layers to the James Krause situation. We don't know what could pop up, come the start of the new year. Also, we thought that Conor McGregor taking himself out of the USADA pool, we're like, oh, now there's a Conor McGregor rule. So it's just like, there's so many loopholes. And they played the video package last week, 30 years starting next year. That's great. 30 years and we still got loopholes. Like, I mean, I don't understand. It's one of those things. And then of course, from a fighting aspect, let's move to UFC 282, if you don't mind. I mean, I bought the hype. I was all in on Paddy. I love the story of Paddy. I love the fact, as maybe you did, maybe you don't care on the personal investment as I do, but when you had two fighters talking about men's mental health in particular, I love that. It was one of the best things I've seen in a while in this sport, and especially in the UFC. And then and he's one of my mentors, so this is not a dig at him, but it's Ariel versus Paddy coming into fight week. It's Paddy versus Topuria, and it's him and Jared roll, and it's like everything just started snowballing and it turned into an avalanche. And then, oh wait, by the way, it only got worse on fight night. I know everyone was rushing to the Conor McGregor comparisons, but is it safe to say that Paddy isn't even scratching the surface of where Conor was compared to where he was at the same given time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely kind of Conor McGregor light at this point, but I think the difference too is that I just don't think they're on the same level skill wise at this point too. I mean, I still think, I think people are making a lot of this performance for Paddy. I think if we go into it realizing he's probably not like a champion apparent, like he's probably not in the next few years going to be a serious title contender. And there's nothing wrong with having big draws, fun guys to watch and stuff. But, when the promotion, the UFC and Dana White, kind of puts all their effort into a prospect or someone like that, you just can't be surprised when it kind of blows up or something goes south and everyone's really ready to, tell you, I told you so, or this guy isn't as good, or you're clearly something shady's going on with these scorecards where it's like, any other fight, I think even a fight like that, I think all the media scored. I was checking MMA decisions. So, I mean, it would still be considered controversial, but I think we would have forgotten about it by now if it weren't kind of like Dana's, hand chosen next guy or the Barstool guy or the guy getting all the attention. But, again, if he's getting the views and people are tuning in and whether they want to see him lose or win, like, I can't fault the UFC for promoting the hot hand, but again, don't be surprised if everyone's ready to sit there and point and laugh or complain about unfair scorecards. When a fight like this happens, when it's close, people are going to assume that you want your guy to win, so they're going to start thinking the worst.
Is it? And this is no disrespect towards the names I'm about to mention, but just as someone who knows the sport, there's nothing wrong, and maybe you can confirm this, right? Isn't there nothing wrong with being another Donald Cerrone, Jorge Masvidal, a Darren Till who fought on the same card, Michael Chandler at this point, right? Like, everyone still loves you, but at some point, check your ego at the door. And they made a belt for Masvidal, and I don't know. I think maybe he still has a shot. I don't know about Darren Till whatsoever. I would like to see Michael Chandler get back to it, but he suffered his own few setbacks. So I think, and maybe you can kind of speak more on this. There's a stigma of, if I'm not the champion, I'm nothing. No, you really can't be. Donald Cerrone is the most beloved fighter in UFC history. And he'll tell you, I just didn't show up. When the lights were the brightest, I just didn't show up. So I don't think it's make or break for Paddy to not become a world champion, but he's got to realize that.
I think that's more of kind of a fighter mentality where if they're not champion, like they're kind of nothing, or that everyone hates them, or they've got something to prove. And I mean, I think those are really good examples. Donald Cerrone, Jim Miller, Clay Guida, I mean, you don't even have to talk about top 15 guys, just guys who bring it. Like fans, if you're going to build your kind of mystique that you're unbeatable or the next champion, and you're ready to line them up and knock them down, like fans are going to be less forgiving of that. If you just say, I want to go in there and give them a fight and a performance, and try to implement my game plan, just a little humility, just being a little bit humble goes so far in this sport. And I think fighters think that they either have to psych themselves up so much that they're the number one guy and they're going to beat everybody. And it's like, that works in boxing, but like MMA fans see right through that, like authenticity. Donald Cerrone is a perfect example of that. I think, where if guys feel, fans feel like they're getting the authentic guy and not someone just talking bravado and pounding their chest, like MMA fans react to that much more, than the tough guy, stuff that so many of them lean into.
And I know a lot of people are like, oh, is he going to get the O'Malley treatment? It's no disrespect to Sean O'Malley, but it's the truth. Is he going to be able to pick his opponents moving forward? Are they going to slow track him? Or is he going to talk himself into a McGregor role where he gets fast tracked to the top? I mean, is it pretty safe to say that the best plan for both parties, being the UFC and Paddy Pimblett, is to pull it back? I mean, I believe it was on MMA Junkie. I was reading, people were calling for, I forget who said it, and I really wish I wasn't blanking right now, but someone called for him to fight a Clay Guida. Like, I'm in. I will take him against veterans. And not because I want to see Paddy put away older, aging veterans, but no, because right now you're nowhere close. And the UFC continuing to put you in the spotlight when you couldn't get it like decisively done the first time. It's not a good look for anybody. And you have all the other controversy surrounding him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of baggage there, but I mean, there's a lot of benefits. Like who's going to headline your London card? That you're, they need some European stars, but just kind of having that Barstool backing now, and just kind of getting that. I don't know what the right. There are some guys and female fighters too, but that just click with kind of your casual fans, your guys who maybe aren't into it hardcore, but like, and I think McGregor just really tapped into the market. And it's not even like just all casuals who don't know the sport, but I've got a lot of friends who just kind of get back into MMA for months at a time when there's a big story, or Brock Lesnar is coming back and stuff. Those people kind of come and go. I think they'll stick around for Paddy, but paint him as a fun guy, a guy who talks, a guy who's going to put on a fun fight and brawl it out. But when you're trying to paint him as like, oh, this is the next contender and he's moving his way up the ladder and now he's going to fight this tough guy, it's like we see through the facade. Like, just be honest with us. Just tell him he's a fun guy who people are going to like to put their wigs on and watch him fight. But I mean, there's a lot going for Paddy. I think they're going around about it the wrong way, but hopefully this makes them reset and realize that, like you said, a Clay Guida, put him in some fun fights, get people excited again. I don't think anyone's going to be like, oh, I respect Paddy now that, he got a decision win against, a top 25 guy. But, going in there, have a barn burner with a guy like Clay Guida, or someone who's going to bring out the fun in a fight, not even get angry with them, but he's going to try to pump him up. He wants to put on a good fight too. So no, I think a guy like Guida, I mean, from a competitive standpoint, maybe that's not the best option, but I don't think that's what they need to be focusing on right now.
Yeah, I think putting Paddy against young upcoming competition, I think we steer away from that. I'm a little pissed Cowboy retired, because I would have taken that fight 100 times over. It could have been Cowboy's revenge from Connor, but I digress. I mean, the judges got it wrong, in my opinion. I don't know if you feel the same in the Paddy
Yeah.
Jared Gordon fight. With that being said, I think the UFC got it wrong with, Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz. Before I ask you about the fight, have you? I know John Morgan said, "Well, you never play matchmaker on Saturday nights." Is that one of the most bizarre instances you've ever seen with Dana, where while the fighters, apparently, as we heard and learned on Monday, Jamal Hill's getting a call while the two main event fighters are getting interviewed in the octagon?
I can't remember if it was John Morgan's podcast or the co-main event podcast with Chad and Ben, but one of them, they were talking like that's a typical event where Dana White comes backstage and he's red-faced and doesn't want to talk and it's pulling teeth. And as soon as he shows up backstage, joking, big smile on his face, it's like, okay, something's going on. And no, I would not have expected them to have that fight lined up so quickly. I mean, just that whole situation sucks, but it's so typical MMA. You can't count on anything in this sport. The moment you try to set plans, and that's one thing I'll give the UFC credit for. Like, they can adapt and move pretty quickly, all things considered, even on fight weeks. But I mean, we don't always get exactly what we want, but you see it in boxing and some other sports that they don't come close to giving you a solid plan B. And I mean, I'm super excited about this fight. I feel bad for Ankalaev and just kind of the other guys who are stuck in this waiting period, going back to the initial champ. But no, it sucks when you have a big fight like that and you're expecting to get clarity and the division can move on and you know exactly what's going to happen. And now we're kind of even more confused than before.
Particularly Anthony Smith, right?
Oh,
I mean, I love that guy to death, and I couldn't feel worse for anybody. I mean, a great job. If anything, in 2022, the UFC showed us they can juggle between the Nate Diaz Hamzat card and now this card. I mean, they can do some juggling in the UFC. But what would you? And I don't want to take up too much more of your time, and I really do appreciate you making time for me. What would you like to see going into 2023? I know we got a lot of unanswered stuff. I know there's always the looming return of Conor McGregor, John Jones, is Francis Ngannou coming back? But I don't want to have to ask you on December 13th, 2023 to do another podcast with me. And we go, judging is still terrible. We have no clarity on like 4 divisions and their titles. I mean, how can we be optimistic and positive and upbeat as we turn the calendar looking to next year?
I mean, maybe John Jones will finally fight at heavyweight. We've been talking about that for a decade. So, no, I mean, the sport and the business of MMA and even MMA journalism and MMA content, it is never better than when the big stars are around. If it's John Jones and Stipe and Nagano, whoever they're, just get them in there. If Connor comes back, I mean, I don't care if he's juiced to the gills at this point. Like, I mean, he's going to obviously be in phenomenal shape when he gets back. But, and then, whether it's like Paddy getting back on track or just, kind of your old vets catching a second win, just when you've got big names. And for me, at USA Today, it was a little easier because they were MMA proponents, but the Athletic, we're fighting with the big sports to get attention on MMA. It's the same thing at the Action Network. Obviously, we're much more sports betting geared, and MMA, I think, is the perfect sport for sports betting, especially if you're trying to learn sports betting. But all of that stuff benefits if big stars are coming around, during the heyday, when it was Ronda and McGregor around and Brock Lesnar poking his head in from time to time, like, dude, we had so many huge traffic nights. And I mean, you probably know, just kind of your friends who maybe aren't hardcore MMA fans, when the big names are around, suddenly everybody's an MMA fan. And I hope we really get a lot of that in 2023. It makes it fun for betting, makes it fun for writing about MMA, but it just makes it fun being a fan.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the last 2 pay-per-views, I mean, yeah, Adesanya brings a huge crowd, but you're trying to explain to people like, and I'm big Adesanya fan personally and as a fighter, but it's like, no, I know this is why you're coming out, but this guy, Alex Pereira, like, no, you gotta. And it's not that I'm trying to teach, a main event preview or a UFC, pay-per-view preview while I'm sitting at the bar. But yeah, I agree with you. The big stars need to come back. I mean, I know she kind of dropped a nugget. I don't know just how impactful it would be for the casual fan, but if we get one more Joanna and Jacek fight next year, I think that would be awesome. I do think they're gonna have to, as much as they did juggling, they being the UFC, they're gonna have to do some shuffling and get their names back in, because it's so much easier. And I hate to say it like this, but it's so much easier to kind of cover up the crap when you have so much nice
Oh
things
yeah.
in front. It's why as kids, I was always like, my mom's like, you clean your room? Yeah, everything's underneath the bed. The bed looks nice, the room's clean, right? There's nothing on the floor, you can't see it. So, and listen, the James Krause situation is a real thing. USADA is always going to be a real thing, and just bad judging. And I'm not going to say fixed fights, but bad judging is not a good thing. So I'm not saying sweep it under the rug, but hide it behind big fights, your superstars. I absolutely agree with you. And on that happy note, I do want to thank you for your time. You're someone, like I've said, and I'll say it here, I've looked up to in the sport. You lend a welcoming and helping hand every time I've reached out, whether it be, personally, professionally, to do this show. It was great to finally get you on this show. And although it doesn't feel like 200 episodes, I'm glad to be here somehow, some way.
No, Mike, I really appreciate it. One of the cool things of covering MMA for as long as I have is seeing young journalists kind of start out and cut their teeth, and now they're just old pros like you and Mike Bond and even Amy Kaplan and people. I see you guys and I'm like, oh, the new folks. I was like, shit, they've been around for a decade now. Like I'm old. So no, it's awesome to see. And MMA is in good hands with the young reporters and content creators and interviewers and hosts that we have. So no, it's my pleasure to come on, and I appreciate the invite.
Well, Dan Stupp over at the Action Network, thank you so much. If you guys want to make money, follow him on Twitter at Dan with 2 N's, STUPP. Thank you so much, sir, and have a great holiday season with you and your family. And hopefully we get some. I guess I want to say big news to start the year, but apparently we're making fights on Saturday nights now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's keep that going. We just always know what's coming up.
Thank you, sir.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.